You're listening to Actors with Issues with Juanialo, a podcast of actors, by actors, and for actors. Today, we are joined by actor Alex Joseph Grayson from the Broadway production of Parade, now in performances until August 6th. Alex Joseph Grayson, you are on Actors with Issues. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So a recurring theme on our show is, that the best way to grow both as an artist and as a person is to just go out and experience life. So you sort of grew up moving around quite a lot because you were in a military family. So do you feel that any of those early experiences shaped you as an artist and who you are today?
100%. I was just talking about this the other day. My aunt actually came to see Parade on Broadway a couple nights ago, and I hadn't seen her in a while. And the thing that came up is pretty much everything that I do on stage as an actor. The things that I come up with in building a character, I don't really create any of these things. I just draw on my experience with humanity in my life. And just to shed a little bit more light on my upbringing, I was born in Watertown, New York. Born in Watertown, New York, specifically because my mother was involved with the Army Reserves at Fort Drum, which is right there. It's like right outside of town. And that's the reason that my parents were in that location. I lived in Watertown until I was about 6 years old, and we left. My mom got mobilized by the Army. She went overseas. My parents were separated. I was back and forth between Rochester, New York, and Watertown. Eventually, I followed my mom overseas. I was in Germany, went to school in Germany for a few months, came back to the States, ended up in the state of Georgia. I stayed there for a few years, did a lot of my elementary school through high school there in Georgia, and then came back up to Western New York. And then in the beginning of my college years, left the States again, spent some time in Guam, India, the Philippines, and then made my way back to New York State to study theater. And the rest is history. And here we are. And in that time, I feel like in my entire youth, it's just been a constant experience of moving, having a new group of people, a new sort of language of the land, a new social hierarchy, another opportunity to learn. I think is sort of like a defense mechanism just for survival, not in pursuit of an acting career, but more just like in being a human and feeling safe. I sort of vowed to myself every time that I would change schools, I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to learn what from the mistakes that I made my last time around, and I'm going to try to be better. I'm going to try and be more like this. I'm going to try and be a little bit more jovial in my interactions. I'm not going to be maybe as loud this time. Maybe I can be a little bit more conscientious this time around with this group of people. And I've just become a real expert observer in my life. And really, like I said before, I have to thank that life's experience for what I'm able to bring to characters on stage, on camera, anything like that. And I'm really grateful for that.
I feel like especially those early years really do shape you as a person. I feel like so many, especially sort of like our generations, like the actors who are like in their 20s and 30s and whatnot, are so shaped by like musical wise, at least like the Disney Renaissance and things like that, that sort of came up during that time. And I feel like younger generations now didn't have that much exposure to music on that scale of like music being in the content made for kids. And sort of, so you growing up in Georgia, did that make the story of Parade hit a little bit closer to home for you, since you were sort of in that area?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is I I know those people that we tell that story about. I know that culture. Um and it does it I don't think the show really has sort of the emotional toll um on me that it has on a lot of people. And maybe that's because of the role that I'm playing. But I feel like there's a lot of actors that have to do some emotional weightlifting.
Mm.
And I just have the opportunity in the show to come in, be a messenger, uh, say a few things that have impact, and then kind of keep moving, which I think is actually great in a long run with a show like this, because it is a very heavy subject matter dealing with the
Mm.
the South in the Jim Crow times, and it ends with a lynching. It's a rough story, and it's a true story, but I do know that what that Southern pride is, what that looks like. Um, and I do think it was helpful to have that personal experience and be able to sort of uh, relate to that and really understand it.
And so now that we're sort of speaking on Parade, um, the story, I was not very familiar with the story. I knew a few of the songs just because, being a musical theater kid myself,
Yeah,
but they're not necessarily roles I could take on, so they're not in my book, like,
sure, 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 sure.
so, but I was familiar with Jason Robert Brown with sort of the general story, and the one song, with the two people who work in the governor's mansion, that just like hit so hard because they said something along the lines of like, a black person is like hung every day and no one basically bats an eye, but
Sure,
now it's the Yankee, and now there's an uproar. And I feel like that's still a conversation we're having now over 100 years later. It's like, there's violence in communities of color that are not, no one really, like they said, sort of no one bats an eye. It's like, oh, that's normal. But once it happens in a non-community of color, it's non-national news and it's being covered by everyone, and politicians are uproaring, and it's just really heartbreaking to see the same thing still happening today.
sure,
So yeah.
sure. And I think that's the thing with Parade. It's a very timely piece.
Yeah.
And I I look out there in the audience, and you know what the demographics of
Right.
Broadway are. Our sort of main viewership is mostly Caucasian people of a certain age.
Mm.
um but when I see people of color out there, I'm always like, oh, okay, someone is going to be affected by this piece in a way that it was not intended to maybe affect people. And I think it's interesting. This show, especially this revival at this time, means a heck of a lot to the Jewish American community. It's a very, very important piece. And there's so many times when I've come out at the end of the show and people will say, hi, I'm a Jew, and I know that this role that you were playing, it was tough to watch the things that you were doing, but I just want to thank you for telling the story so well and like being a part of this. And it's interesting because I I don't necessarily um because I'm not experiencing anti-Semitism. I I can only just listen to that and like receive that and understand that this is really a powerful show. But I will say, as a black man doing this, I have very much I've always known with the time period, got it. This is that horror story of history that I can't give myself over to too emotionally, because it's a dangerous thing. Also, my story historically is not the focus of this piece. As you say, that song "Rumblin' and a Rollin'" is just a moment in which we say something that's pretty like serious. a black man swinging in every tree. Like those are major implications. But as you said before, we as a people, even today, we're desensitized
Yeah.
to images and news of um, marginalized people dying and being harmed. Which that's like people don't bat an eye at that. So it's interesting to sort of have that duality and exist there. Understand that there's important work, but also that that commentary. I think that's a much larger story of how we don't bat an eye at these specific stories.
And with the show, I mean the two songs that you have, that's what he said, and Feel the Rain Fall are both total showstoppers. I was like, so just firstly, congratulations on an amazing performance.
Thank you
And
so
on
much.
the show as a whole, just was so moving and captivating and just upsetting, that's just the story is so upsetting. And how, even in that show, they talked about, how referring to Jesus, there was a Jew years ago who was handed over to a mob. It happened again here. It's happened many times since then, that people take the law into their own hands, and uh it's just devastating. But I'm curious, between the first day in rehearsals for the City Center production to today, how have you grown and changed as an artist?
It's very interesting. So City Center, I feel like I have to say this anytime I talk to anybody. City Center is a great place to work, and it's a great opportunity for an actor who, from a business standpoint, if you're trying to sort of raise your market value, your brand as an actor, because it's like the biggest venue that exists here in New York. Everybody in the industry is going to come and see what you're doing, and uh, it's like you're given a megaphone for um your career or whatever. The other side of that is it's a 10-day rehearsal process, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And that's an insanely short amount of time to put a show up. So my first thing was, okay, when I start this rehearsal process, I'm going to be off book first and foremost.
Yeah.
So the none of that process was me learning the
The material.
the text,
Yeah.
you know. But at the same time, I was creating the life of this character, the physical life, and figuring out what I was actually going to be doing. And it was a lot of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks,
Yeah.
and I was lucky to have an experience recently doing Into the Woods on Broadway, which started at City Center. I didn't do the City Center run of the show,
Mm.
but we went back to City Center to rehearse for Broadway. I came in with the Broadway cast, and I was an understudy, and I got to watch these actors in a 10-day rehearsal process just kind of like come up with what they could come up with. And I actually I think I owe a lot to Gavin Creel, because I watched him just try things, and I was like, you know what, that's an example of how you sort of proceed without fear, without worrying about if you're someone's going to judge you on what choices you make, and just do as much as you can. So I took that to heart, and I took that 10-day process to just try everything I could, let my director dial me back, and I just proceeded in a very unrestrained fashion. And then when we finally opened on Broadway, when we transferred with Parade, I took that as a rehearsal process, and I feel like I've actually finally gotten to the point, post Tony Awards and all that stuff, where I I know where this character can go. It's not exactly the same every night, but I do feel like as an actor with this opportunity to be in the show every night. This is my fourth Broadway show, but my first time as an onstage company member here in a big commercial production in New York. Uh, I feel like it's it's very validating in the sense that uh as long as I have the right preparation, people are going to accept what I'm doing. And as long as I sort of approach things with integrity, it's going to have a positive impact on someone. Maybe not everybody, but it's going to have a positive impact somewhere. So I I think in a way, I've changed in the sense that I think I have a lot more confidence in my ability to affect people in that positive way. I think I have maybe more respect for myself as an artist than I have in the past, and I have learned, having to sing these difficult songs every night, that that respect extends to how I treat myself physically, how much sleep I am giving myself, the type of substances I'm putting in my body. Can't drink alcohol and then sing this stuff. It just doesn't work. So yeah, it's been great in that way. And now I'm excited for whatever the future holds.
And I mean,
Yeah.
this again, like this has been such an amazing production, and it's a shame that the run is so short, but understandably, actors have other projects, other commitments, and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but folks, if you are in New York or in the New York area, please go see Parade. It is playing in performances at the Bernard B. Jacobs on Broadway until August 6th. And Alex, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking with us about the show and your experience and everything. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Actors with Issues on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel for full video interviews. Actors with Issues is executive produced and hosted by Juani Ala. See you next time.